it's about picking those artists that can't get popularized, and that's the only way you can wow people. But with wealthy people, it's kind of easy in the sense because they got money, so you got to just find the artists that are just out of this world, and just no one can really touch them unless they invest a whole career.
This is The Bigger Picture, an inside look at the businesses that make the art world work and the stories behind the people that shape them. This show is brought to you by Arcata, the leading due diligence network specifically built for the art market and trusted by over 450 members. To understand how Arcata can help you comply and succeed with challenging regulations, go to arcata.com. Today we're joined by David Knowles, founder and creative director of Artelier. So thank you for joining us, David. I'm going to start off with the question that we ask everybody at the start of this podcast, which is how you sort of got into a career in the art market, because you had a BA, I think, in fine art rather than history of art or anything like that. Is that right?
Yes, my background is training as an artist, really. So I chose to study fine arts, which means you kind of get into the studio and get making, and then I carried on with a master's in fine art as well. It does. You can't just kind of make stuff in your studio without being aware of what's going on in the real world. So that there are elements of art history and studying contemporary artists and everything else. So you can contextualize what you're doing. So there's a written element to it as well. So it's not just having fun and games in the studio with paint and whatever. You've got to actually do some proper studying as well.
Don't burst my bubble. Did you grow up loving art? Has it always been your thing? Is your family sort of quite creative, or?
Yeah, I think I haven't got like kind of parents that are artists or writers or anything like that, but it's something that I've just kind of had a natural affinity for, and it was nothing's kind of forced or anything. It's just kind of I just went with the flow, really.
And then you moved, am I right? You went into an arts council role, so sort of public sector art projects. How did that come about from your MA?
Yeah, so I mean, starting a career in the arts is difficult. So I kicked off wanting to be an artist, but I quickly kind of realised that I was going to struggle to pay the bills and what have you from making art. So I did kick off with a few of my own kind of art projects and got a bit of funding from the Arts Council to put on some exhibitions and bits and pieces. And then really I needed to get a job as well. So I was working in a gallery as like an assistant and a technician, helping put the paintings on the wall and things like that. And then a post came up in a smaller gallery that was kind of struggling and had lost its funding and stuff like that. So I thought I'd take that on in my kind of spare time on just one day a week. It's a kind of voluntary kind of position, but it was a foot in the door to get kind of hands on with running a gallery and running the program and selecting the artists and curating and all of that. And then I did that for about I think about 6 or 7 years. And it started to get some traction with getting some more funding for the gallery and building up the program and building up the profile of artists. We started off with very kind of up and coming emerging artists, and then by the end we were able to kind of mix in some more established artists, and so it went well for a while, yeah.
And that was primarily sort of funded, so either working with the National Portfolio Organisation or sort of project funds rather than private sector.
Yeah, exactly. It was all either Arts Council funded, more kind of project based rather than National Portfolio, and then other grants like Heritage Lottery and other funding. The other funding opportunities out there, some local authority as well. So a mix. Also having we rented our own artist studios and businesses and stuff as well, so we had our own income as well. So it was a blended kind of income.
That's what everyone's looking for these days, isn't it?
Someone's looking for, but it's tough. It's tough, and you even if you are doing a great job and ticking all the boxes and everything else, it is ultimately out of your control because it's it's public money that can chop and change, and it was during a time when there's a lot of austerity as well. So I decided to put that same amount of energy into a slightly more commercial setting. That if you are doing a good job and hitting the spot and doing great things, and you will continue to get the work. And so it felt like I could have a bit more control over my own destiny in that sense.
So is that, I was going to ask how that transition from, I know it's not as simple and clear cut as public sector to private, but it sounds like there's a feeling, not necessarily of frustration, that feels too strong, but wanting to try something else and have a bit more freedom.
It probably was a bit of a frustration in a sense. It's tough when you're hanging off every grant. You just put a grant in, and then you're kind of a year into it, and you've got to start applying for the next one. So it's a bit of a hamster wheel of grant applications, and there's a lot of suspense when you put it in, whether you're going to get it back or not. And so you can build on your successes, but equally you can have it kind of taken away from you quite easily as well. So
and the reporting obligations, I think it's quite normal to underestimate how much reporting needs to be done, just like corresponding with a relationship officer, isn't it? It's quite, especially if you're a single practitioner, that's quite a heavy obligation.
Yeah, it was a lot of, we're a small team, so I don't know, about 3 or 4 of us in the end, all funded through the grants. But yeah, there's lots of reporting and paperwork and stuff like that. But it was more that side of it was okay in a way, because it's good to kind of take stock and evaluate what you're doing and everything else. I kind of didn't mind that. It's more the effort that you have to sometimes. In a way, you can't get funding for the same project twice. Yeah. So we had to kind of reinvent ourselves every 2 or 3 years, which is not what we wanted to do necessarily. We wanted to just keep on. We were onto a good thing, so we wanted to just keep in that groove.
And is that how Artelier sort of developed? Did it develop from those public projects, and as you say, you sort of build that consistency and goal, and you wanted it to just keep building, so you decided to go off on your own venture type thing?
It was a complete break in a way. It's completely a complete leap of faith into new territory from scratch, really. So as a kind of amateur, so to speak, in that world. So so we sort of understand the background of how that happened. How did you go about it? Because it sounds very brave. As someone who gets panicky about everything. I was part, so I had, a few different things on the go. One of them was the gallery. So it wasn't a full-time job in the gallery, so it's probably half a week. So then it's a case of, if you're doing two or 3 days in the gallery, it's then spending 3 or 4 days on Artelier. So if you put in a lot of hours, 4 days a week, you can do a week's worth of work in 3 or 4 days, if you're working into the evening and Saturdays and whatever. So it was a case of just getting stuck in and finding a new way, a new industry, and actually going in kind of raw in a way, without too much the baggage of learning from other companies and stuff. It's it then kind of maybe gave us a bit more of a fresh perspective in the industry, and in coming at it from maybe slightly without the kind of influences of other people in a way. You're kind of just going at it in a new way. Did
it organically sort of develop and shape itself, or did you go in with a fixed idea of like, I think we need to do this, and you went out and found the market?
It was just trying to get the first few jobs, really. So it wasn't a case of, a lot of people set up a company off the back of contacts they've got from their current employer or whatever. Or it was more a case of just going in blind, really, and feeling around in the dark. So we first tried to make some traction with architects, thinking that was a way in. And that didn't really get anywhere. I think we've got maybe one little job out of that, but then getting some more traction instead with interior designers, with yachts and stuff like that. So then kind of exploited that niche for a while, and then that opened doors into residential, and then it was a case of how do we then get into hotels, and it was a case of really selling ourselves on the kind of boutique nature of what we do, but also bringing our kind of private project knowledge into a hotel, which a lot of hotel art consultants are oblivious to. So it was a case of that was our unique selling point, and then once getting a bit of traction with the hotels, then it becomes now it's more of a case of we're kind of selective about what hotels we work on, because we're not a hotel art consultant. It's not really our thing to focus purely on hotels. So, but it was a case of now selecting just the hotels that really work for us in terms of being a challenge and doing something interesting.
So for those of us who aren't familiar, could you just outline your sort of key services, like how you describe yourselves and what your core sort of projects are these days?
Yeah. So I suppose we've gone kind of full circle now. We do work with a lot of architects in public art. So public art is now a kind of a key area that we work in. We work on Section 106s a lot, which is basically where the local authority for a developer that's building a new building make sure that developer puts something back into the community through public art. So we often do work on those schemes. They could be a square in London. It could be a retail park. It could be a industrial park. So quite varied. Then we work on hotels. So generally now we only work on like iconic hotels. So obviously top end brands with a good budget, but not wanting to do the kind of stereotypical hotel art thing and cut corners and value engineer all that. So it's only for the hoteliers that are kind of understand art in its true sense, and it's more like curating and exhibitions rather than kind of art for hotels and decor. We don't do decor. And residential, we still do residential and yachts and aircraft. So this is more the luxury lifestyle sector. It's just one of these things that some of the most amazing artists and craftspeople in the world, they are expensive. So the only clientele really that will buy their stuff are the mega wealthy. So that's where I suppose you could say they're kind of like patrons of the arts in that sense. And these artists only really get work out of those type of people. So.
And on these projects, obviously you trained in art. Are you directly the artist, the lead visionary for these, or is your role more sort of bringing together the right creatives to deliver the vision, or a blend of the two?
So we're kind of quite a boutique company in terms of size. We're about 14 people, 14 kind of core team employed, and then sometimes bring in extra freelancers here and there. But we're consciously that small. We could be bigger. I suppose we could go mass market and be 3 or 4 times the size if we took on every job that came our way. But we want to keep that small because we're kind of like control freaks. Not just me, but everyone in the team are kind of really passionate about what they do. So I'm involved in every project, but I'm not doing I'm not leading the vision of it. Each team member can kind of develop it in their own way, but we're always checking in with each other, and it's not like one voice. We always make sure there's a group of a team of us working on it, so we can give different perspectives on things and shape it. So it's kind of a holistic. It's kind of like it's more of a kind of a holistic kind of Artelier approach, and there's no one kind of. And there's no one style or way of working in a way. We adapt for each project. So each presentation we do for a client for a new project, we haven't got like a format, a template we just fill out. We kind of wipe it all away and start again each time. Even down to fonts and brand, and colors, just in the document and stuff like that. But then also, obviously, all the artists are completely different every time.
Yeah.
We're not just pushing the same artists. We're not really commercially driven in many ways.
So even just hearing you describe like the overarching demand or the clients you work with, you've got quite a range. I mean, I've worked with local authorities on public art projects. The range of experience, I guess, and confidence in local authorities can vary quite significantly. Working with a sort of government organisation versus working with ultra high net worth circumstances. Is there a lot of similarity? Is it a completely different project? I'm just trying to get my head around what the ask would be and where the similarities would be.
Yeah, I think the similarities in I think our process is the same, but the clients are very different. So whether it's a large sculpture for the facade of a student accommodation, which is kind of under a Section 106, or whether it's a tiny little sculpture for a private client's desk in their office. The process of kind of understanding what the client wants and who that client is. So obviously, in the context of the public art piece, the client is more than just one client. It's the public, it's the architects, it's the local authority, it's the community panel, whatever. That's the client. It's a kind of a broad spectrum of a client. It's kind of the client is a multifaceted client in that sense. But then for the private project, it's just one person. But then again, I suppose it isn't, in the sense of they have a wraparound of a representative, an interior designer, a kind of a financial support person, whatever. So in the end, we're just an advisor in the mix of it all, and we just got to understand the dynamics of that and make sure everyone's listened to, and we understand the end goal, really. In a way, we kind of switch off from the noise of the personalities and the individuals and stuff. We just what do we got to achieve here? What's the end result need to be? And kind of switch off from some of those dynamics in a way. Just kind of be quite pure about it. Quite objective, really. It's amazing how objective you can be about art. You can be brutally objective about art in a way. It's a kind of an oxymoron in a way, because everyone thinks it's so subjective. But in many ways, in every project, often the art we end up with is just it's a dead ringer. It's like it can only be that. It's kind of weird, but it does.
I know what I mean. It's like creating an objective platform so the artist can be purely subjective potentially, but like be able to focus on the vision, and you're creating that objective space for them.
You set like a stage for it all. You set parameters, stage rules, and then when it comes down to it, there's only one artist. With public art, obviously, we often do open calls. So who are the artists that actually want this and want to pitch up and put a proposal in? Of those, which one is actually on budget, on time, on theme? Are they capable, blah, blah, blah. And then by the time you get down to it, there's only one person really that can do it. And then same for a client, if they want to spend this much money, they want this kind of look and style and feel, they want an artist from this heritage or country.
Yeah.
By the time you go through all of that, it's like I often say we're like a kind of matchmaking service between artists and clients. For every artist, there's a client, For every weird artwork that's out there, there's a weird client that wants that. And for every generic, boring, repetitive painting, there's a huge amount of people that want that stuff as well. So
still a black of the art world. That's the tagline.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
And you talk about objectivity, because one of my questions, I think potentially more around the ultra like high net worth, the luxury markets, and it might just be because I'm sat here in Abu Dhabi about to go into this collector's week where it's all about luxury. A lot of, when we're reporting on the art market, a lot of talk around purchases is kind of on an investment level. So the idea of like purchasing an artwork or piece of jewelry or whatever, property, there's always a discussion around the investment on the other side. Are you just completely free from that bit of the conversation?
I think I like to not make any promises. So we don't like any kind of spoofing, so to speak. So I suppose we're pretty skeptical about a lot of the kind of valuations of certain artworks, and I think it's there are some artists that are obviously making great waves and celebrated amongst curators and writers and critics and all of that. And they are undoubtedly kind of pure, dedicated artists that deserve recognition, and they're dedicating their careers to it. But it's also for every one of those, there are thousands of people that are kind of okay artists, or kind of maybe more skeptical, more like opportunist artists that are trying to jump on the bandwagon. And it's also quite easy to set up a gallery and grab a load of artists and do a fancy profile for them. And when you actually look into them, they've only ever spent half a day a week in a studio, and they can't be bothered to put any more time in than that and everything else. And they're not as dedicated as these other artists that have sacrificed their lives for their art, kind of thing. So it's there aren't many artists out there that really do sacrifice themselves for their art. So they're hard to find, but we know a few. But
and the ones do you work with, and again, this probably force you into a sweeping statement, so feel free to tell me not to answer the question, but do they have a preference, some of them, in terms of like, yes, I'm interested in public sort of local government contracts, no, I don't want to design something for a yacht for whatever reason, it doesn't sit with what I do. Do the artists you work with kind of have an end result for where their work should be?
Yeah, I mean, certainly. I mean, they're just like the matchmaking idea. We are also looking at in some situations. When we're talking about kind of art that you're going to see at art fairs and stuff like that, you are looking at potentially two opposite ends of the spectrum of the mega wealthy, and then not the mega poor. In terms of world poverty, not the mega poor, but in a kind of Western country kind of context, people that are pretty skint. They are two opposing worlds, and so some people some artists, if you were to tell them where their art might end up, they might be a bit kind of anti that. But then they've also got to get real in the sense of, if they're selling a painting for 5K, for example, which is actually cheap for a painting, but you can get cheaper paintings, obviously, then not many people I know will go out and spend 5K on a painting. So you are talking, the people that I might know that might spend that would be people that I'd consider, really quite wealthy. So
yeah,
if you're an artist that makes prints for 150 quid, you can have that opinion because you are talking mass market and most people can afford a nice print for 150 quid. But if you want to sell your work and fill your bank account with 5K every painting you knock out every week or so, then you've got to accept the fact that they are going to be wealthy people that buy them. So it's, but to be honest, a lot of the time we don't even tell artists where their work is going, because it's kind of, as far as they're concerned, on some projects, we're the client. On those kind of private things, doesn't really matter to them. But on the public art project, it's a different, whole different scope. It's all about context. It's all about visiting the space, understanding it, and that's a really we need some really deep and meaningful conversations with those artists to make sure they're right for the job.
I also feel, and this is just experience, I might have just been on some difficult projects, but it's quite a vulnerable, what's the word I'm looking for? The artist is in quite a prominent position in a public discourse around a work of art. So often, there's this, not antagonism, but there's an odd relationship sometimes between community and government expenditure on an artwork during times which are difficult. And the artist becomes almost like the central point of that conversation. So as an individual or a collective, that's quite a challenging position to be in, I think, unless it's managed well. Is that part of your role, making sure that they're, I guess, prepared, aware of that?
It's it's quite a tough gig for an artist to have work so public, isn't it? And you're opening yourself up for huge criticism, potential criticism. So it's and artworks don't last forever, do they? They can get a bit passé and everything else, and or irrelevant, or even completely out of context and need to be removed for whatever reason. So it is a tricky one, public art. But I think we all understand it's not forever, and it's at that moment in time it's relevant and meaningful. It's always good for the artist to be kind of a deserving artist that really it means something to them in their career, and they're representing their community as well. And I think as long as you've got the right number of people involved, the right panel, and you've got different people that specialize in different areas. So you might have a local history group, and you might have people that are local residents that are going to actually live with that piece, because a lot we never live with these, but many of these public artworks, we forget that people actually are living with it and looking at it every day.
Yeah.
And you want to change, when you've got a picture on the wall in your house, you want to change it every now and then. So these guys can't do that. They're stuck with it. So
easier on a yacht. You can just change it around as it suits your taste.
Yeah, exactly. With the public art ones, you got to be, I think as long as you get that wraparound, you build a team around you that is kind of a bulletproof kind of team that you've covered every angle, you've done everything you can. It's never going to be perfect, but it's going to create something really good for a while, and then it may need to change in the future, and have a bit of fun as well. You don't want to go safe as well, because that's the worry. The dodgy ones are the ones where everyone plays it too safe. It's designed by committee. It's all got to, it gets.
You end up with a bronze statue on a horse and just another male equestrian statue. That's what the default panic is.
It's good to create a bit of a stir, actually. And
it is. I'm just for the artists. I always feel a bit sorry for them if they're in the centre of it.
It's okay. Yeah, you got to just choose one that's got some kind of oomph about them, and
and enjoys it, maybe. I know, like, part of a lot of artists' work is to have that dialogue. So I get that for a lot of them, that's the sort of reaction that's wanted. We've loosely touched on, I guess, some different audiences for the art you work on. So, yeah, as you say, like the ultra wealthy, and then communities with quite a breadth of needs, I guess, and demographic status. I think I sort of understand, I guess, how public art has developed in terms of the market for the luxury, ultra high net worth, the yachts, clients, etc. Has that changed or developed significantly since you started working in it? Has it become more prominent, more articulated, or do you feel like it's been fairly consistent?
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a kind of an aesthetic. It's tricky. I think probably how's it changed? I don't know. I mean, I think everyone's looking for something different, and I think it's the case in. It's the way of the world that we've got access to so much information, so everyone can get on it, Pinterest and Instagram, and kind of see everything, kind of thing, and it's kind of like, how do you show someone something original, because everyone's seen it all before, and if they haven't, when you show them an artist, or that artist, I can tell that artist has been looking at that artist and basically doing rip-offs of that artist so similar. And anything that is quite kind of quirky and unusual quickly gets exploited, and other artists pick up on it and can create very similar techniques and styles and everything else. So there's a lot of kind of amateur artists out there that are grabbing, rather than going to art college and studying it properly, and just putting themselves in a studio with four white walls and a paintbrush and imagination. They're going online to get inspiration, and that's not the place to go. And so there's a lot of visual tripe out there, and there's a lot to wade through to find something truly kind of unusual and quirky and original. So that's the challenge, I think, and that's how it's changing. Is everything's looking the same? Everything's looking the same, and it's hard to deliver something different, and wow people. It's hard to wow people, very hard to. You've got to really go some to do that.
And that sort of goes back to your earlier point, I guess, around luxury items being that for that level of craftsmanship, that dedication, that time, it costs money. I guess luxury and art goes together quite comfortably.
Yeah. And those kind of the kind of spectacular artists out there, they can kind of be the effect of their work can be watered down by other artists imitating it. A bit like when you see designer furniture, that's a fantastic a fantastic Philip Stark chair, but then they're not. All the Chinese factories are knocking them out, and then all of a sudden you're like, I don't really like having these Philip Stark chairs anymore because they're all the cafes around the corner in these cheap cafes and stuff, and they kind of get popularized. It's the same with art in a way. So it's about picking those artists that can't get popularized, and that's the only way you can wow people. But with wealthy people, it's kind of easy in a sense because they've got money. So you got to just find the artists that are just out of this world, and just no one can really touch them unless they invest a whole career in that process.
So does that demand necessarily artists that are a lot more, as you say, focus on like developing craftsmanship, those skills, as well as the concepts? Because I guess concepts, they can fall into a brand easy and be diluted quicker than something that's concept and skill development.
So I suppose I'm talking quite a lot about kind of technique, materiality. So when you get to kind of high level skill, high skill kind of artistry and technique, then that's where they can that's where kind of an artist can be secure themselves, but they've also got to keep innovating as well, and that's the only way they're going to stay up there is to continue their innovation and pushing boundaries, because they know that people are seeing their work and that people are chasing them. I think you're always getting chased. You've always got someone behind you if you're doing that type of work, so you've always got to keep ahead of the game and innovate. That's the only way.
It leans quite well into sort of immersive experience as well, or how we used to talk all the time about how video art was impossible to collect. But actually, if you're a luxury collector, you have those spaces, you have those storage units, you have those facilities to be able to show art on a bigger scale, on a more complicated scale than perhaps someone just collecting mid-range or lower level, I guess.
Yeah.
I had a look at your website earlier because I'm so good at research, and there's quite a lot there about sustainability, which is obviously a priority for the whole sector at the moment. How does that actually come to life in your work? Like, what does it mean in terms of the projects you work on, how you go about it?
So, I think, it's been a buzzword for quite a while, isn't it? And it's a kind of a little bit ironic in some sectors to talk about that. So I think we don't push that kind of vibe on any project. Sometimes we get asked for artists that are sustainable, but if it's more of a case of we have a natural affinity with certain artists that have a way of working, and some of these things that we have in our kind of, I think we've got a section on our website, kind of our mindset or whatever, and our way of working and thinking. And if it's us, what we like, what kind of we get off on in a sense is various things. One is kind of ancient craft and heritage techniques. So there's kind of this idea of because we love travel, we love working with artists all around the world, and each of them, when you work with some artists, they bring their kind of heritage through in their work, and they're kind of reviving or keeping alive a certain craft technician. It could be a technique of ceramic firing or bronze sand bronze casting or whatever. So we have a natural affinity for that, and often that goes hand in hand with sustainable practices. So it could be that they're working with a clay that is sustainably sourced from the ground around them, or they're working with wool, like a felting technique. There's some lovely artists that work with felting, and they work with, obviously, wool. It can be very sustainable in the sense of it can be harvested each year, and everything else. So, and then obviously, those are natural materials as well. So when the artwork eventually ends up in the ground, it just decomposes and stuff. So we kind of like that poetry of kind of people and land and heritage and stuff, and not all projects enable it, but we do get the odd project where we can kind of really go at it kind of in a thorough way. So that's why we've got a bit of a mention on that on our website.
Yeah, and as you say, it's something. It's been a bit of a buzzword, but I do think people are beginning to think about it in terms of like, what actually does it mean? Like, what are we actually doing? So, you touched on there, and I was speaking to your colleague about it. So you have an office in Bristol, but actually quite a lot of the work you do is all over the place. So you have a couple of offices, is that right? But you work remotely and you work with artists from all over, depending on the client.
Yes, well, our main hub is in Bristol in the UK, we have kind of drop-in kind of client offices in certain key places around the world where there's a good market. But I mean, most of our work, if it's public art, most of our work is in London and the UK.
Yeah.
And so we're working mainly in those contexts. We're working mainly with a team of a British team, a group of companies in the UK. And often working with artists based in the UK. They may not be British, but they're artists based in the UK. But then we go much further afield than that. So that if we look at the hotels, they're kind of all over Tokyo, Seychelles, Maldives, Dubai.
Sounds really hard work. I feel really sorry.
Marrakesh. Yeah, we don't always get to go to the places because.
True.
Not that we plug the whole sustainability thing, but we don't do it necessarily for sustainability. We do it not because we're lazy, but it doesn't make sense to get on an airplane all the time. And what we actually love doing is actually we find local people in those cities. So we've worked on an island called Miyakojima, which is off Okinawa near Taiwan. It's a Japanese island. And we, most of the project, we worked with we found a local guy there who's actually a teacher in the local school, but he's interested in art and he had the availability. He's Australian, but he spoke Japanese, and he was our kind of man on the ground, finding a few local artists.
Find someone like that. Do you put an ad in a paper or something? Like old school?
I can't quite remember, but we find amazing people all over, and they may not even, we'll be open in saying that sometimes they're not trained in art, but we kind of train them. When we get them on board, we do an onboarding, we train them up. They get it. They get exactly what we're trying to do, because it's actually quite. If you've got the right direction, it's quite simple what we're doing. We give very clear instructions, and we've done it in Serbia, Maldives, all over, and we find fantastic local people, not just the artists, but like a curator, project manager, and then they're like our man on the ground, so to speak, and they're the ones that have got their ear to the ground and telling us what's going on, and then they help us find interesting artists, and then we start to fire up interesting conversations with random artists. Many of them are kind of nobodies in a way. I know it sounds mean to say, but they're kind of no one ever heard of them or given them a second look. But we'll see them that they might make interesting little ceramic trinkets or whatever, and we say, well, hang on a minute, we've got an idea. We could do something quite dramatic in a hotel lobby. Let's get them on Teams. Let's chat to them and see what they can do. Get some samples done, and then before you know it, they're kind of catapulted into the one of the finest hotels in the world. And they're a year ago they were just making little trinkets for the local market or whatever. So but
you stay in touch with everyone. Is it sort of like this big network that's growing just as you accumulate your projects?
Yeah, we often keep in touch, and we then also bring them in on other projects in other countries. So we say, well, actually, we've got another ceramic pitch for this project. Would you be interested in making them for that? And then they start to work in other territories as well. But and then at the other end, when the budget's right, we're working with wealthy artists that have got a studio of 10 or 15 or 20 people. They employ more people than us. They've got loads of money. They've got us. We have to deal with their assistant on the job and whatever, and it's a completely different conversation. But we don't. As long as the end result is what everyone's looking for, we're not snobby in that sense. We can talk to kind of the lowest of the low and the highest of the high. We're kind of impartial to that. We don't have any opinions, really. We don't have any egos in that sense.
I am way too nosy. I would be flying around in a really unsustainable way at the end of each project to see what was going on. So it's very good I'm not on your team. Finally, we always ask this, and the reactions are quite different. Not necessarily if you were starting out again, but we have a lot of listeners who are either sort of early career or maybe thinking, what the art world's like, about a bit of a career change. What advice would you give from like a career perspective if they were interested in the art market or art world?
I think I'd probably book myself, and I'd probably get on a fine art course, lock myself away in some artist studios for 2 or 3 years. Nice. Don't look at art online. Look at it in the flesh.
To just really, what's the word? Just really not consume the art, but really spend time with it before you start thinking about skill.
You've got to go to the museums, go to the galleries, see it in the flesh, stare at a blank canvas, and start to understand what it is to be an artist, what it might be to create a painting. And then the great thing about studying art is that the thing that I enjoyed the most, which at the time was the most kind of painful, was to do the kind of show and tell. You got a group.
Yeah, I can do that.
And it's a painful process to start with, and then you get into this kind of groove of it. It's almost like a kind of almost like a kind of group of group counselling kind of thing. Then you then start to get supportive. You start, someone will show something, a terrible piece of art that just is shocking in every single way, but you can actually start to see something in it that you can understand where it might have come from, and then you kind of build it up from the ground up, and you start to cling on to any little bit of prospect in it, and then build it from there. And then you start to get these kind of quite lovely conversations around it, and then it becomes more than actually just what you're looking at. And I think probably the thing that I learned the most is in those sessions, and now probably the thing I enjoy the most is being put into a situation where something random is put in front of me to look at, and talking about it and understanding it and asking questions and unpicking it until it's kind of completely kind of picked apart, and then you can kind of reassemble it in your own way, in your own mind, and that's kind of what it's about, I'd say.
I also think, regardless of what sector you end up in, going through a process of peer review, we used to do it in journalism, but it's not widely done in all areas, but getting peers to review what you've done, it's good practice to do for other people, but also it is quite good to open yourself up and be criticized and supported. And
you got to accept your vulnerability and lay yourself bare and take it, and then it's a good process.
Yeah, it teaches you to cry quietly in the corner in a discreet way, which I think is a great life skill, really. So on that positive note, that's the end of my questions. But thank you so much. I feel I'm going to go and have a look at a lot of your projects. It must be really inspiring doing what you do. It must feel like at the end of the year you've made stuff happen, which is quite rare in a lot of jobs. So good luck with it, and thank you for your time today. Thank you for listening. You can follow and subscribe to The Bigger Picture wherever you get your podcasts. And to learn more about this episode or to reach out to us directly, please visit us at arcata.com.